Elena Marchetti had always believed that love was enough. She believed it when she married Marcus Wright 3 years ago in a small ceremony at the local courthouse. She believed it when she gave up her dreams of finishing her business degree to support his career as a real estate agent. She believed it when she took extra shifts at the diner where she worked, handing over most of her tips to help pay for his expensive suits and networking events. And she believed it even now, standing in the bathroom of their modest apartment, staring at the positive pregnancy test in her trembling hands. The pink lines were unmistakable. 2 of them, bold and clear and life-changing. Elena pressed her free hand against her still flat stomach and felt tears slide down her cheeks. They were not tears of joy, though she desperately wished they were. They were tears of fear, of uncertainty, of knowing deep in her heart that Marcus would not take this news well. Their apartment was small, barely 600 square feet of space that always felt cramped and cluttered. The furniture was secondhand, picked up from garage sales and thrift stores. The walls were thin enough that Elena could hear their neighbors arguing about money, about children, about all the same things that she and Marcus argued about when he came home late smelling of expensive perfume that was not hers. She had tried to ignore the signs. The late nights he claimed were for showing properties. The phone calls he would take in the hallway, speaking in hushed tones. The credit card statements that showed dinners at restaurants she had never been to. Elena told herself that she was being paranoid, that Marcus loved her, that their marriage was strong enough to survive the difficult times they were going through. But now, with this positive test in her hand, she could no longer pretend. Elena was 26 years old, and she felt like her life was falling apart. She heard the front door open and, close, heard Marcus call out her name in that impatient tone he had developed over the past year. Her hands shook as she quickly wrapped the pregnancy test in toilet paper and stuffed it into the pocket of her cardigan. She was not ready to tell him. Not yet. She needed time to think, to plan, to figure out how she was going to handle this. She splashed cold water on her face and patted it dry with a towel before stepping out of the bathroom. Marcus was standing in the kitchen, loosening his tie with one hand while scrolling through his phone with the other. He was a handsome man, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that he kept perfectly styled and green eyes that had once looked at Elena like she was the most precious thing in the world. Now, those eyes barely glanced at her when she walked into the room. "There's nothing to eat," he said, not looking up from his phone. "I was going to make pasta," Elena replied softly. "I just got home from my shift an hour ago." "Pasta again?" Marcus sighed heavily, as if she had just announced the greatest inconvenience of his life. "Elena, I work hard all day. The least you could do is have a proper dinner ready when I get home." Elena bit her tongue. She worked hard too. She worked double shifts at the diner, dealing with rude customers and aching feet and a manager who constantly reminded her that she was replaceable. But she had learned long ago that pointing this out to Marcus only led to arguments, and she was too tired for arguments tonight. "I'll make something else," she said. "What would you like?" Marcus finally looked at her, his eyes sweeping over her worn cardigan and faded jeans with something that looked almost like disgust. "Never mind. I'll order something. I'm meeting a client for drinks anyway. I just came home to change." Elena felt her heart sink. "Another client meeting? Marcus, you've been out every night this week." "That's how the business works, Elena. Maybe if you understood anything about ambition, you'd know that." He walked past her without another word, heading toward the bedroom. Elena stood alone in the kitchen, her hand pressed against her pocket where the pregnancy test was hidden. She thought about the tiny life growing inside her, thought about what kind of future she could offer a child. She thought about her own mother, who had raised her alone after her father walked out when Elena was just 3 years old. She thought about the promise she had made to herself that she would never let her children grow up the way she did, struggling and uncertain and always feeling like they were not quite enough. The apartment felt suffocating suddenly, the walls closing in on her. Elena grabbed her coat and her keys and walked out the front door. The evening air was cool against her skin, carrying the smell of autumn leaves and distant rain. Elena walked without any destination in mind, her feet carrying her through the familiar streets of the neighborhood where she had lived for the past 2 years. She passed the corner store where she bought groceries, the laundromat where she washed their clothes because their apartment building's machines were always broken, the park where she sometimes sat on Sunday mornings watching families play and imagining what her own family might look like someday. She ended up at the diner where she worked, a small establishment called Rosie's that had been serving the community for over 40 years. It was closed now, the lights off and the chairs stacked on the tables, but Elena had a key. She let herself in through the back door and sat down in one of the booths, the same booth where she always took her breaks. The silence was comforting in a way that surprised her. Elena pulled out her phone and stared at the screen, thinking about who she could call. Her mother had passed away 2 years ago, just a few months before Elena married Marcus. Breast cancer, discovered too late, taken too quickly. Elena's father was nothing more than a faded photograph and a name she barely remembered. She had no siblings, no close friends who would understand what she was going through. She was completely and utterly alone. Elena put her phone away and wrapped her arms around herself, rocking slightly in the booth. The pregnancy test was still in her pocket, a constant reminder of the reality she was not yet ready to face. She did not know how long she sat there before her phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number was unfamiliar, a local area code, but not one she recognized. Elena almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. "Hello, is this Elena Marchetti?" The voice on the other end was professional, polite, with the careful enunciation of someone who spent their days making important phone calls. "Yes, this is Elena. Ms. Marchetti, my name is Richard Thornton. I'm an attorney with Thornton, Mills and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of your grandfather, Henry Marchetti." Elena felt the world tilt beneath her. "My grandfather? I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. I don't have a grandfather. My father left when I was a child. I never knew any of his family." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I understand this must be confusing, Ms. Marchetti. Perhaps it would be best if we met in person. There are matters we need to discuss that are quite sensitive in nature." "I don't understand," Elena said, her voice shaking. "What matters? Who is Henry Marchetti?" "Ms. Marchetti, your grandfather passed away 3 weeks ago. He was a very wealthy man, and you are his sole surviving heir. I need to speak with you as soon as possible about your inheritance." Elena laughed, a hollow, disbelieving sound. "This has to be some kind of scam. I'm a waitress. I work double shifts just to pay my rent. There is no wealthy grandfather. There is no inheritance. I assure you, Ms. Marchetti, this is not a scam. I have documentation that proves your identity as Henry Marchetti's granddaughter through your father, Antonio Marchetti. Your grandfather spent the last years of his life searching for you. He wanted to make things right before he died." Elena's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Make things right? What does that mean?" "It means he wanted to leave you everything, Ms. Marchetti. His entire estate, all of his assets and holdings. We're talking about a significant sum of money." "How significant?" Another pause. "Approximately $10 billion. The phone slipped from Elena's fingers and clattered onto the table. She stared at it for a long moment, certain that she had misheard, certain that this was some kind of cruel joke being played on her by an uncaring universe. $10 billion. The number was so large it seemed meaningless, like something from a fairy tale or a movie. Elena picked up the phone with trembling hands. "I'm sorry," she said. "Did you say 10 billion? "Yes, Ms. Marchetti. $10 billion. I know this is overwhelming. That's why I would like to meet with you tomorrow to explain everything in detail. Can you come to my office?" Elena agreed, writing down the address on a napkin with hands that would not stop shaking. After she hung up, she sat in the dark diner for another hour, trying to make sense of what had just happened. A grandfather she never knew existed. A father who had abandoned her before she was old enough to remember his face. A fortune so vast she could not begin to imagine what it meant. And a baby growing inside her, a baby who might just change everything. When Elena finally returned to the apartment that night, Marcus was already asleep, or at least pretending to be. She slipped into bed beside him without a word, lying on her back and staring at the ceiling until dawn began to lighten the sky. She did not sleep at all. The next morning, Elena called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. She put on the nicest clothes she owned, a simple black dress that she had bought for her mother's funeral, and took a bus across the city to the address the lawyer had given her. Thornton, Mills, and Associates was located in a tall glass building in the financial district, the kind of building Elena had only ever walked past, never entered. She felt painfully out of place as she stepped into the marble lobby, surrounded by men and women in expensive suits who moved with the confident stride of people who belonged in places like this. The receptionist on the top floor greeted her with a warm smile that put Elena slightly at ease. "Ms. Marchetti? Mr. Thornton is expecting you. Right this way." Richard Thornton was an older man, perhaps in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His office was large and filled with leather-bound books and framed certificates, but there was something approachable about him that made Elena feel less intimidated. "Please sit down," he said, gesturing to a comfortable chair across from his desk. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "Water, please," Elena said, her throat suddenly dry. Once she was seated with a glass of water in her hands, Mr. Thornton opened a thick folder on his desk and began to explain. "Your grandfather, Henry Marchetti, was born in a small village in Italy in 1935. He came to America when he was just 17 years old, with nothing but the clothes on his back and a determination to make something of himself. He started working in construction, saved every penny he earned, and eventually started his own company." Elena listened in silence as the lawyer told her the story of a man she had never known. Henry Marchetti had built his construction company into an empire, expanding into real estate development, manufacturing, and eventually technology investments. He had married once, to a woman named Rosa, who had given him a single son, Antonio. "Your father," Mr. Thornton said gently. Elena nodded, her heart aching for reasons she could not fully explain. The lawyer continued. "Antonio had been a difficult child, rebellious and resentful of his father's success. He had left home at 18, cutting off all contact with his family. Henry had spent years trying to find him, but Antonio had changed his name and moved constantly, determined to disappear. Your grandfather never stopped looking," Mr. Thornton said. "When he finally found his son again, it was too late. Antonio had passed away in a car accident 7 years ago. But the investigators your grandfather hired discovered something else. They discovered you." Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "He knew about me? For 7 years, he knew I existed, and he tried to reach you, Ms. Marchetti, multiple times. But your mother always sent his letters back unopened. She refused his phone calls. She wanted nothing to do with the Marchetti family." Elena thought about her mother, about the bitterness that had always lingered behind her smile when Elena asked about her father. Her mother had never spoken about Elena's paternal relatives, had always insisted that there was no one else, that it was just the two of them against the world. "Why?" Elena whispered. "Why would she do that?" "I can only speculate," Mr. Thornton said carefully. "But from what I understand, your mother blamed the Marchetti family for your father's abandonment. She believed that Henry's demanding nature and high expectations drove Antonio away, and in turn drove Antonio to abandon you. It was too much to process." Elena pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to stop the tears, trying to make sense of a past that had suddenly become so much more complicated than she had ever imagined. "After your mother passed away," the lawyer continued, "your grandfather finally had the opportunity to reach out to you directly. But his own health was failing by then. He had terminal cancer. He spent his last months putting his affairs in order, making sure that everything he had built would go to you." Mr. Thornton slid a document across the desk. It was a copy of a handwritten letter, the handwriting shaky but legible. He wrote this for you. He wanted you to have it. Elena picked up the letter and began to read. My dearest Elena, you do not know me, and I cannot blame you for that. I am the grandfather who should have been there for you, who should have fought harder to be part of your life. I have made many mistakes, more than I can count, but my greatest regret is that I never got to see your face, never got to hold you in my arms, never got to tell you how much you were loved. I know your life has not been easy. I know you have struggled in ways that no grandchild of mine should ever have to struggle. I wish I could go back and change things, but I cannot. All I can do now is leave you everything I have, and hope that it brings you the happiness and security you deserve. Use this money wisely, my dear girl. Use it to build a life that makes you proud. And know that even though we never met, I loved you from the moment I learned you existed. Your grandfather, Henry Marchetti. Elena clutched the letter to her chest and wept. When she finally composed herself enough to speak, Mr. Thornton explained the details of the inheritance. The estate included cash assets, stock portfolios, real estate holdings across 3 continents, and majority ownership in several companies. The total value after taxes and fees was just over $10 billion. There are some conditions, the lawyer said. Your grandfather wanted to ensure that this money would be protected. There is a trust structure in place that will release the funds to you gradually over the next 10 years, although you will have access to a significant sum immediately for living expenses and any investments you wish to make. Elena nodded numbly. She could barely comprehend numbers this large. The idea of having enough money to pay her rent next month seemed like a fantasy. The idea of having $10 billion seemed like something from another universe entirely. I should also mention, Mr. Thornton said, that your grandfather was very private about his personal life. Very few people knew about his search for you, or about your existence at all. The media is not aware that Henry Marchetti had a granddaughter. If you wish to keep your inheritance private, that is certainly an option. Elena thought about Marcus. She thought about the way he looked at her, the dismissive tone in his voice, the expensive perfume she smelled on his collar. She thought about the positive pregnancy test still hidden in her cardigan at home. Yes, she said quietly, I would like to keep this private. For now. Mr. Thornton nodded understandingly. Of course, take all the time you need. I am here to help you in any way I can. Elena left the lawyer's office several hours later with a folder full of documents and a debit card linked to an account containing more money than she had ever imagined possible. She walked through the financial district in a daze, past the expensive boutiques and restaurants she had always assumed she would never be able to enter. She could buy anything she wanted now. She could go anywhere, do anything, become anyone. But as Elena made her way back toward the bus stop that would take her home, she realized that there was only one thing she truly wanted. She wanted a family, a real family, full of love and support and unconditional acceptance. She pressed her hand against her stomach, where her baby was growing, and made a decision. She would not tell Marcus about the inheritance. Not yet. She needed to know first if he truly loved her, or if he was only staying with her out of convenience. She needed to know what kind of father he would be before she brought a child into the world. It was a test, she told herself. A test of character. A test of love. Elena had no idea that this test would reveal truths far more painful than she could ever have anticipated. When she got home that evening, Marcus was sitting on the couch, watching television with a beer in his hand. He barely looked at her when she walked in. "Where have you been?" he asked, his tone bored rather than curious. "I had some errands to run," Elena said. "How was your day?" Marcus shrugged. "Same as always. I've got another client meeting tonight, so don't wait up." Elena nodded, her heart heavy in her chest. She watched her husband get up from the couch, watched him walk into the bedroom to change into yet another expensive suit, watched him leave the apartment without so much as a kiss goodbye. She sat down on the couch he had just vacated and let the tears fall. The next few weeks passed in a strange blur. Elena continued going to work at the diner, continued living in the small apartment, continued pretending that everything was normal. She did not touch the money in the account Mr. Thornton had set up for her, except to pay off her mother's remaining medical bills and to quietly establish a savings account for the future. She had another doctor's appointment and received news that changed everything once again. She was not just pregnant with one baby. She was pregnant with triplets. Elena sat in the examination room, staring at the ultrasound images of 3 tiny heartbeats, and felt the world shift beneath her once more. 3 babies. 3 lives depending on her. 3 reasons to figure out what she was going to do with her marriage, her money, and her future. She knew she could not keep her pregnancy a secret from Marcus much longer. Her body was already beginning to change, her clothes growing tighter, her morning sickness becoming harder to hide. It was time to tell him the truth, at least part of it. Elena decided she would tell Marcus about the babies, but not about the inheritance. She would give him the chance to prove that he could be a good father, that he could step up when his family needed him. She prayed with all her heart that he would not disappoint her. But deep down, in a place she did not want to acknowledge, she already knew the answer. She already knew that Marcus Wright was not the man she had married 3 years ago. And she already knew that the hardest parts of her journey were still to come. Elena took a deep breath, pressed her hand against her growing belly, and prepared to face the storm that was waiting for her at home. She had no idea just how devastating that storm would be. Elena spent 3 days working up the courage to tell Marcus about the pregnancy. She rehearsed the words in her head while she worked at the diner, practiced them in front of the bathroom mirror when Marcus was out for his endless client meetings, whispered them to herself as she lay awake at night listening to her husband breathe beside her. She wanted to believe that he would be happy. She wanted to believe that the news of becoming a father would change him, would remind him of the man he had been when they first met, when he used to bring her flowers for no reason and tell her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. That man felt like a stranger now, someone from a different lifetime. But Elena held on to hope anyway because hope was all she had. On a Thursday evening, she prepared a special dinner. She used some of the money from the inheritance account to buy ingredients she never would have been able to afford before: fresh salmon and asparagus and a bottle of wine that Marcus could drink while she nursed her glass of sparkling water. She set the table with candles and the nice dishes they had received as wedding gifts and never used. When Marcus came home that night, he stopped in the doorway and looked at the table with something like suspicion. "What's all this?" he asked. "I wanted to do something nice for you," Elena said, her voice trembling slightly. "I have something I need to tell you." Marcus loosened his tie and sat down at the table, his expression unreadable. Elena served the food and sat across from him, her heart pounding so hard she could barely hear herself think. She watched him eat for a few minutes, watched him scroll through his phone between bites, watched him exist in the same room as her without really seeing her at all. "Marcus," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm pregnant." He looked up from his phone. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in his eyes that might have been surprise or excitement or even joy. But then his expression hardened into something cold and distant. "You're what?" "Pregnant," Elena repeated, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "We're going to have a baby." Marcus set down his fork and stared at her across the table. "How did this happen?" "We've been careful." "Not careful enough, apparently." Elena tried to smile, tried to lighten the tension that was thickening the air between them. "I know it's unexpected, but I hoped you might be happy." "Happy?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Elena, we can barely afford this apartment. We can barely afford to feed ourselves. How are we supposed to afford a baby?" "We'll figure it out," Elena said. "People do it all the time. My mother raised me on her own, and Your mother lived in poverty her entire life," Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp. "Is that what you want for our child? To grow up the way you did, wearing second-hand clothes and never having enough?" Elena felt the words like a slap across her face. She thought about the inheritance, about the $10 billion sitting in an account with her name on it, about the way this conversation could change completely if she just told him the truth. But she stayed silent. She needed to know. I'm not finished, she said quietly. Marcus, it's not just one baby. I had an ultrasound yesterday. We're having triplets. The color drained from Marcus's face. He pushed back from the table and stood up, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair, pacing across the small kitchen like a caged animal. Triplets, he said, his voice rising. 3 babies. 3 babies, Elena. Are you kidding me? Is this some kind of joke? It's not a joke. I saw their heartbeats. I have the pictures if you want to see. I don't want to see anything. Marcus grabbed his keys from the counter. I can't do this. I can't deal with this right now. I'm going out. Marcus, please. But he was already gone, the door slamming shut behind him, leaving Elena alone at the candlelit table with tears streaming down her face. He did not come home that night, or the next night, or the night after that. Elena called his phone dozens of times, but it went straight to voicemail. She texted him message after message, begging him to come home, to talk to her, to work through this together. He never responded. On the 4th day, Elena was sitting on the couch in her pajamas, too exhausted and heartbroken to go to work, when she heard a key in the lock. She jumped to her feet as Marcus walked in, but the hope that had flared in her chest died immediately when she saw the expression on his face. He was not alone. Behind him stood a woman Elena had never seen before, a stunning blonde in a designer dress and stiletto heels, with perfectly manicured nails and a diamond bracelet glittering on her wrist. Elena, Marcus said, his voice flat and emotionless. This is Veronica, my girlfriend. Elena felt the world spin around her. She reached out for the back of the couch to steady herself, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. Your girlfriend? Veronica smiled. A cold, cruel smile that made Elena feel small and insignificant. That's right. Marcus and I have been together for almost a year now. He's been meaning to tell you, but you know how these things are. It's always so awkward. Elena turned to Marcus, searching his face for some sign of remorse, some indication that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. But there was nothing there. Nothing but indifference. Marcus, what is this? What's going on? What's going on? He said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. Is that I'm leaving you. I've already found an apartment with Veronica. I just came to get my things. But I'm pregnant. With your children. Our children. Veronica laughed. A high, tinkling sound that made Elena's stomach turn. Oh, honey, did you really think that was going to change anything? Marcus doesn't want children. He's made that very clear. Whatever you decide to do about your little situation is your problem, not his. Elena felt rage building in her chest, hot and fierce and overwhelming. This is not a little situation. These are babies. 3 babies. And they are Marcus's children, whether he wants them or not. We'll see about that, Veronica said, examining her nails with a bored expression. Marcus has told me all about you, you know. The poor little waitress with the dead mother and the absent father. Always so desperate for love that you'll accept any crumbs he throws your way. She stepped closer, her expensive perfume washing over Elena in a sickening wave. But here's the thing, sweetheart. Marcus doesn't love you. He never did. You were just convenient. A warm body and a paycheck while he was building his career. Now that he doesn't need you anymore. She shrugged, the gesture somehow more devastating than any words could be. Elena turned to Marcus again. Is this true? Is any of this true? He could not meet her eyes. Elena, let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Just sign the divorce papers, and we can all move on with our lives. Sign the divorce papers? Elena's voice cracked. Marcus, I'm carrying your children. How can you just walk away like they don't exist? For a moment, something that might have been guilt flickered across Marcus's face. But then Veronica placed her hand on his arm and the moment passed. I'll have my lawyer send over the documents, he said. I expect you to be out of the apartment by the end of the month. I've already talked to the landlord. The lease is in my name. Out of the apartment? Marcus, where am I supposed to go? He was already walking toward the bedroom, Veronica trailing behind him like a shadow. That's not really my problem anymore, is it? Elena sank onto the couch, her entire body trembling. She could hear them in the bedroom, hear Veronica making snide comments about the cheap furniture and the worn carpets, hear Marcus agreeing with her in that dismissive tone he had perfected over the years. She pressed her hands against her stomach, feeling the slight swell that was just beginning to show, and made herself a promise. She would not break. She would not let them see her break. No matter what happened, no matter how much it hurt, she would survive this. She would survive it for her babies. An hour later, Marcus emerged from the bedroom with 2 suitcases. He did not look at Elena as he headed for the door. "Marcus," she called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "Before you go, I need to know one thing." He paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Did you ever love me? Even a little bit?" The silence stretched between them, heavy and painful. "I thought I did," he said finally. "But you were never going to be enough, Elena. You were never going to be what I needed." And then he was gone, and Veronica was gone, and Elena was alone in an apartment that suddenly felt like a tomb. She did not cry. Not then. She sat on the couch in complete stillness, staring at the door that had just closed on her marriage, on her dreams, on the life she thought she was going to have. And then, slowly, she began to laugh. It started as a giggle, soft and almost hysterical, bubbling up from somewhere deep inside her. It grew into a full laugh, the kind that made her stomach hurt and brought tears to her eyes, because the irony was too much. The cosmic joke was too perfectly crafted for her not to appreciate it. Her husband had just thrown her out for being poor, for being nothing, for being a burden he no longer wanted to carry. And he had no idea that she was worth $10 billion. Elena laughed until she could not laugh anymore, and then she got up from the couch and walked to the window. The city stretched out before her, glittering with lights and possibilities she had never imagined. Marcus Wright thought he was getting rid of a problem. He thought he was trading up, moving on to something better. He had no idea what he had just lost. Elena picked up her phone and called Richard Thornton. "Mr. Thornton," she said when he answered, "I think it's time we had another meeting. Things have changed, and I'm ready to take control of my inheritance." "Of course, Ms. Marchetti. When would you like to come in?" "Tomorrow morning. First thing." After she hung up, Elena began to pack her own bags. Not because Marcus had told her to leave, but because she was choosing to leave. She was choosing to walk away from this cramped apartment and this broken marriage and this life that had never been good enough for her anyway. She was Elena Marchetti, granddaughter of Henry Marchetti, heir to a fortune beyond imagining. And she was just getting started. The next morning, Elena arrived at the law office looking different than she had during her first visit. She still wore simple clothes, still had dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights, still carried herself with the uncertainty of someone who had spent her whole life being underestimated. But there was something new in her eyes, a determination, a fire that had not been there before. Mr. Thornton noticed it immediately. "You look like a woman with a plan," he said as she sat down across from his desk. "I am," Elena replied. "I've spent my whole life being pushed around, Mr. Thornton, being told I wasn't good enough, being treated like I didn't matter. But that ends now. I have 3 babies on the way, and I refuse to raise them in a world where people like my husband think they can treat others like garbage just because they have money." Mr. Thornton nodded slowly. "What would you like to do?" Elena leaned forward in her chair. "First, I want to understand exactly what I have. All of it. Every company, every property, every investment. I want to know how my grandfather built his empire, and I want to learn how to run it myself." "That will take time," Mr. Thornton cautioned. "Years, potentially. There are board members, executives, partners who have been managing things in the interim. They may not react well to a new owner suddenly, taking interest. Then we don't tell them who I am. Not yet." Elena's mind was racing, ideas forming faster than she could articulate them. I'll come in as a new employee, work my way up, learn the business from the inside. By the time they realize who I am, I'll know everything there is to know about how things operate. Mr. Thornton studied her for a long moment, a smile slowly spreading across his face. You know, your grandfather would have liked you very much. He was the same way, determined to earn everything himself, even when he didn't have to. Is that possible? Can you arrange something like that? It will take some delicate maneuvering, but yes. Your grandfather's main holding company, Marchetti Enterprises, has been operated by a board of directors since his health declined. They're expecting a new CEO to be appointed eventually, someone chosen by the board. But, as majority shareholder, you have the ultimate authority over that decision. Then this is what we'll do, Elena said. I'll start at the bottom, an entry-level position in one of the subsidiary companies. Something where I can learn without drawing attention. And while I'm doing that, I want you to handle my divorce. Your divorce? Elena nodded. My husband left me last night. He's having an affair with another woman, and he wants nothing to do with me or our children. He expects me to just sign whatever papers he sends over and disappear quietly. But you're not going to do that. No, Elena said, a cold smile crossing her face. I'm not. I want you to hire the best divorce attorney you can find. I want everything documented, every affair, every broken promise, every cruel word. But I also want my inheritance kept completely secret. Marcus cannot know about the money. Not yet. Mr. Thornton raised an eyebrow. May I ask why? If he knew what you're worth, he might reconsider. That's exactly why, Elena interrupted. If he comes back to me now, I want it to be because he actually loves me, because he realizes what he lost, not because he found out I'm rich and wants a piece of it. She paused, pressing her hand against her stomach. But honestly, I don't think he will, and that's fine. I just want to make sure he can never claim he didn't know about the children. I want everything on record so that when these babies are born, the world will know exactly what kind of man their father is. Mr. Thornton nodded slowly. You've thought this through. I had a lot of time to think last night. Elena stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Mr. Thornton, I spent my whole life believing I was nobody. My father abandoned me before I could walk. My mother worked herself to death trying to give me a better life. My husband treated me like a burden. But I'm done believing that. I'm done being the victim of everyone else's story. It's time to start writing my own. She turned back to face the lawyer, her eyes shining with unshed tears and unshakable resolve. My grandfather left me more than money. He left me a legacy. And I'm going to do everything in my power to honor that legacy, to build something my children can be proud of, to become the kind of person who makes the world better instead of tearing it down. Mr. Thornton rose from his desk and extended his hand. Then let's get started, Ms. Marchetti. We have a lot of work to do. Elena shook his hand firmly. Yes, we do. Over the next several weeks, Elena's life transformed in ways she never could have imagined. She moved out of the apartment she had shared with Marcus and into a modest but comfortable place in a different neighborhood, paid for in cash from her inheritance account. She quit her job at the diner not because she was too good for it, but because she knew she needed to focus on learning everything she could about the Marchetti empire. Mr. Thornton arranged for her to start as a junior analyst at one of the subsidiary companies, a mid-sized real estate development firm called Cornerstone Properties. No one there knew who she really was. To them, she was just Elena Marchetti, a young woman with an unusual last name and a hunger to prove herself. The work was hard, harder than anything Elena had ever done before. She spent long hours studying spreadsheets and market reports, learning the language of business that had always seemed so foreign to her. She made mistakes, lots of them, but she refused to give up, refused to let anyone see her struggle. Her pregnancy progressed, and with it came new challenges. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Exhaustion that made it hard to concentrate. the growing awareness that she was carrying 3 lives inside her, 3 little hearts beating in rhythm with her own. She saw a doctor regularly, a specialist in high-risk pregnancies who had been recommended by Mr. Thornton. Everything looked healthy, he told her. The babies were developing normally, but she would need to be careful, especially as she got further along. Elena promised to take care of herself, but she could not bring herself to slow down. There was too much to learn, too much to do. The divorce papers arrived exactly 1 week after Marcus left. Elena read through them carefully, her heart aching at the cold, clinical language that reduced their 3 years of marriage to a series of asset divisions and liability allocations. Marcus wanted nothing from her. No alimony, no shared property, no acknowledgement of the life they had built together. He just wanted her to sign her name and disappear. Instead, Elena called the divorce attorney Mr. Thornton had hired, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Chen who had a reputation for never losing a case. "My husband thinks this is going to be simple," Elena told her. "He thinks I'm going to just roll over and let him walk away." "And are you?" Margaret asked. "No. I want this documented. I want it on record that he abandoned me while I was pregnant with his children. I want proof that he knew about the triplets and chose to leave anyway. That can be arranged. Do you want to pursue child support?" Elena thought about it for a moment. Child support from Marcus would be a pittance compared to what she had access to now. But it wasn't about the money. "Yes," she said. "I want him to be legally responsible for these children. I want him to have to acknowledge that they exist, even if he doesn't want anything to do with them." Margaret smiled, a knowing smile that made Elena feel like she was in good hands. Consider it done. As the weeks passed, Elena began to settle into her new life. She made friends at Cornerstone Properties, colleagues who saw her as hardworking and determined, who had no idea about the fortune she had inherited or the drama unfolding in her personal life. There was Sarah, the office manager who always brought in homemade cookies and asked about Elena's pregnancy with genuine interest. There was David, the senior analyst who took her under his wing and patiently explained concepts she did not understand. There was James, the CEO's assistant, who always had a smile and a kind word ready whenever Elena passed his desk. For the first time in her life, Elena felt like she was part of something, like she belonged. But she never forgot why she was there. Every night, after the office emptied out, she stayed late studying financial reports and company structures. Every weekend, she visited the public library and checked out books on business management and corporate strategy. She was not just learning how to do her job. She was learning how to run an empire. Mr. Thornton kept her updated on the broader picture. Marchetti Enterprises was a sprawling conglomerate with interests in real estate, manufacturing, technology, and media. Her grandfather had spent decades building it, acquiring smaller companies and integrating them into a larger whole. The board of directors was made up of experienced executives, but they were getting restless. They wanted to know who would lead the company going forward. They wanted to know about the mysterious heir who had inherited everything. "We can only keep your identity secret for so long," Mr. Thornton warned her during one of their weekly meetings. "Eventually, the board will need to make decisions that require your input. And once that happens, your anonymity will be over." "How long do I have?" Elena asked. 6 months, maybe. A year at most. Elena nodded, doing the math in her head. By then, her babies would be born. By then, she would have a solid foundation of knowledge and experience. By then, she would be ready to step into the spotlight. "Then we make the most of the time we have," she said. Mr. Thornton smiled. "Your grandfather would be proud of you, Elena. He really would." Those words stayed with Elena long after she left the lawyer's office. She thought about Henry Marchetti, the grandfather she had never known, the man who had spent years searching for her, who had left her everything he had. She thought about what he must have been like, this immigrant who had arrived in America with nothing and built an empire through sheer determination and hard work. She wanted to honor his memory. She wanted to be worthy of the legacy he had left her. But first, she had to survive the challenges that were still to come. because Elena had a feeling that Marcus Wright was not finished with her yet. He was a man who did not like losing, who did not like being left behind. And when he found out what she was really worth, there was no telling what he might do. Elena placed her hands on her growing belly, feeling the flutter of movement that had started just a few days ago. 3 lives depending on her. 3 reasons to be strong. She would not let them down. No matter what Marcus tried, no matter what obstacles appeared in her path, Elena would protect her children and build a future worthy of the Marchetti name. She just had to be ready for whatever came next. And deep down, in a place she did not like to examine too closely, she knew that the hardest battles were still ahead. Because Marcus Wright had made a powerful enemy when he threw her out. And Elena Marchetti was not the type of woman to forgive or forget. The months passed more quickly than Elena expected, each day blending into the next in a blur of work, doctor's appointments, and quiet moments spent preparing for the arrival of her children. Her belly grew round and heavy, making it harder to hide her pregnancy at work, though by now everyone at Cornerstone Properties knew and had been nothing but supportive. Sarah organized a baby shower in the break room, complete with 3 matching onesies and a cake decorated with little pink and blue footprints. David gave her a giant stuffed elephant that he claimed would be perfect for a nursery. Even James, who she barely knew beyond passing hellos in the hallway, contributed to a gift card that made Elena's eyes fill with tears. These people, who did not know her secret, who had no idea that she could buy the entire company they worked for, had welcomed her into their lives with open hearts. It was more than Marcus had ever given her in 3 years of marriage. Elena's divorce was progressing slowly, complicated by Marcus's reluctance to acknowledge the pregnancy. His lawyer had argued that there was no proof the children were his, that Elena could have been having an affair, that she was simply trying to trap a successful man into supporting babies that might not even be related to him. The accusations had stung, but Margaret Chun had been relentless. She demanded a paternity test, which Marcus could not refuse without looking guilty. She gathered evidence of his affair with Veronica, documenting expensive dinners and romantic getaways that had been paid for with money Marcus had claimed they could not afford. The test results came back positive, of course. The triplets were definitely his. Marcus's lawyer had gone quiet after that, no longer able to hide behind claims of uncertainty. But Marcus himself remained stubbornly resistant. He refused to pay child support. He refused to attend any doctor's appointments. He refused to have anything to do with the pregnancy, insisting through his lawyer that Elena was trying to ruin his life. Elena almost felt sorry for him. Almost. She was 6 months pregnant when she got the call that changed everything. It was late in the evening, and she was at home in her small apartment, reviewing some financial reports she had brought from work. Her phone rang, and she saw Mr. Thornton's name on the screen. "Elena," he said when she answered, his voice tense. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "It's the board of directors. They've been doing some investigating of their own. They've discovered that your grandfather had a granddaughter, and they're demanding to meet you." Elena felt her heart drop. "Already? You said I had at least 6 months." "I know. I'm sorry. One of the board members has connections we didn't anticipate. He's been digging into your grandfather's personal affairs, looking for leverage to use in the upcoming CEO selection process." "What does this mean?" "It means you have a choice to make. You can come forward now, reveal who you are, and take your rightful place as the majority shareholder of Marchetti Enterprises. Or you can try to stay hidden, but I have to be honest with you, Elena. If the board discovers you've been working at one of the subsidiary companies under a false pretense, it could damage your credibility significantly." Elena closed her eyes, trying to think through the implications. She had known this moment would come eventually. She had been preparing for it, studying every aspect of the business she could get her hands on. But she had not expected it to come so soon, before her babies were born, before she felt truly ready. "How much time do I have?" "The board is meeting next week. They want answers by then." "Then I'll give them answers," Elena said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "Set up a meeting." I'll be there. After she hung up, Elena sat in the darkness of her apartment, her hands resting on her pregnant belly. She could feel her babies moving, 3 distinct lives growing stronger every day. They gave her courage. She had been hiding for too long. It was time to step into the light. The board meeting was held in the penthouse conference room of the Marchetti Enterprises headquarters, a gleaming tower in the heart of the city's financial district. Elena had walked past this building dozens of times on her way to work at Cornerstone Properties, never imagining that someday she would own it. Mr. Thornton met her in the lobby, his expression a mixture of concern and pride. "Are you ready?" he asked. "No," Elena admitted. "But I'm going to do it anyway." They took the private elevator to the top floor, where a receptionist directed them to the conference room. Through the glass walls, Elena could see a dozen men and women seated around a massive table, all of them turning to look as she approached. She took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The room fell silent as she walked in, her pregnant belly impossible to ignore. She saw the board members exchanging glances, saw the doubt and skepticism in their eyes. They had expected many things when they demanded to meet Henry Marchetti's heir. A pregnant young woman in a simple maternity dress was clearly not one of them. Elena walked to the head of the table, where an empty chair waited. She did not sit down. Instead, she stood tall, meeting each pair of eyes in turn, letting them see that she was not intimidated. "My name is Elena Marchetti," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I am the granddaughter of Henry Marchetti and the majority shareholder of this company. I understand you have questions. I'm here to answer them." The silence stretched for a long moment. Then, a man near the end of the table spoke up, his voice dripping with condescension. "You expect us to believe that you, a pregnant woman who has been working as a junior analyst at one of our subsidiary companies, are qualified to lead a multi-billion-dollar enterprise? I expect you to believe that I am who I say I am," Elena replied calmly. "The documentation Mr. Thornton has provided should make that clear. As for my qualifications, I've spent the past 4 months learning every aspect of this business, from the ground up. I may not have an MBA from a fancy university, but I understand how this company works in ways that many people in this room do not." "For months," another board member scoffed. "That's supposed to impress us?" "What impresses me," Elena said, turning to face him directly, "is that my grandfather built this company from nothing. He arrived in this country with no money, no connections, no formal education. What he had was determination and the willingness to work harder than anyone else. Those are qualities I share with him." She let her gaze sweep across the room, taking in the expensive suits and the skeptical expressions. "I know you don't trust me. I know you look at me and see a young woman who doesn't belong in a room like this. But let me be clear about something. I am not here to ask for your approval. I am here to claim what is rightfully mine." Elena pulled a folder from the bag she had brought with her and placed it on the table. "This contains my analysis of Marchetti Enterprises' current operations. Every subsidiary, every investment, every strategic decision made in the past 3 years. I've identified areas of inefficiency that are costing this company millions of dollars annually. I've also identified opportunities for growth that the current leadership has failed to pursue." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I am not asking to be CEO. Not yet. I still have much to learn, and I have other priorities right now." She placed her hand on her belly. "I'm going to be a mother in 3 months. My children will always come first." "Then what are you asking for?" one of the women on the board asked, her tone more curious than hostile. "I'm asking for a seat at this table. Not as a figurehead, not as a rubber stamp, but as an active participant in the decisions that will shape this company's future. I'm asking for access to information, to resources, to the people who know this business better than I do. And I'm asking for your patience while I learn." Elena looked around the room once more, meeting each pair of eyes. "My grandfather trusted me with his legacy. He could have left it to anyone, to the board, to a charity, to the government. But he chose me. I intend to prove that his trust was not misplaced. The room erupted into conversation, board members turning to each other with a mixture of outrage and grudging respect. Mr. Thornton stepped forward, fielding questions and providing documentation that supported everything Elena had said. But Elena's attention was elsewhere, because sitting in the corner of the room, a visitor's badge clipped to his expensive suit, was Marcus Wright. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Elena saw the exact moment when recognition dawned on his face. His jaw dropped, his face went pale. He looked from her pregnant belly to the folder on the table to the deferential way the board members were treating her, and she could almost see the pieces clicking into place in his mind. Elena smiled at him, a cold, triumphant smile that held no warmth. "Hello, Marcus," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "Surprised to see me?" Every head in the room turned. The conversations died. Mr. Thornton looked confused, not understanding the significance of the exchange. Marcus stood up, his hands trembling. "Elena? What is this? What's going on?" "What's going on?" Elena said, walking toward him with measured steps, "is that I am the majority shareholder of Marchetti Enterprises, the company that owns, among other things, the real estate firm you've been desperately trying to get a listing from for the past 6 months." She stopped in front of him, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead. "You threw me out, Marcus. You told me I was nothing, that I would never be enough. You abandoned our children before they were even born." Elena tilted her head, studying him as if he were a particularly disappointing specimen. "Tell me, how does it feel to know that the woman you discarded like garbage is worth more than you could ever hope to make in 100 lifetimes?" Marcus's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Behind Elena, she could hear the board members whispering to each other, could sense the shift in the room's energy. "I want him removed from this building," Elena said, turning to the nearest security guard. "And I want his name added to a list of people who are never to be allowed into any Marchetti property again." "You can't do this," Marcus finally managed, his voice cracking. "Elena, please, we should talk. I made a mistake. I know that now. But these are my children, our children. You can't just—" "I can," Elena interrupted, her voice like ice. "And I am. You made your choice when you walked out that door 4 months ago. Now I'm making mine." The security guards moved forward, each taking one of Marcus's arms. He struggled, calling out Elena's name, making promises he had no intention of keeping. Elena turned her back on him. "Where were we?" she asked the stunned board members. "I believe we were discussing my role in this company." The meeting continued for another 2 hours, during which Elena answered questions, defended her analysis, and demonstrated a depth of understanding that surprised even Mr. Thornton. By the time it was over, she had been granted exactly what she asked for: a seat on the board, access to all company information, and the time and resources she needed to continue her education. She had also made a dozen powerful enemies among the board members who resented her sudden appearance and the disruption she represented. But that was a problem for another day. For now, Elena was exhausted. Her back ached, her feet were swollen, and all she wanted was to go home and sleep for about 100 years. Mr. Thornton walked her to her car, a concerned expression on his face. "That was a bold move with your husband." "Ex-husband," Elena corrected. "The divorce isn't final yet, but it will be soon. He's going to be a problem, Elena. Men like that don't take public humiliation well." "I know." Elena rested her hand on her belly, feeling her baby's kick. "But he was going to be a problem anyway. At least now he knows what he's dealing with." "And what exactly is he dealing with?" Elena looked at the lawyer, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. "A woman who has nothing left to lose and everything to gain." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Elena attended board meetings, reviewed financial reports, and met with executives from across the Marchetti empire. She asked questions constantly, absorbing information like a sponge, never pretending to understand something she did not. Some of the board members were hostile, resentful of her sudden power and influence. Others were cautiously supportive, recognizing her intelligence and work ethic even if they doubted her experience. A few, like Margaret Chen, who had agreed to join the board as general counsel, became genuine allies. But it was the reaction of the regular employees that surprised Elena the most. Word had spread quickly through the company that Henry Marchetti's granddaughter had emerged from obscurity to claim her inheritance. Everyone wanted to know who she was, where she had come from, what she planned to do. Rumors swirled through the hallways, each more outlandish than the last. Elena addressed them directly, visiting each subsidiary in person, introducing herself to the people who kept the company running. She told them her story, the abbreviated version, skipping over the painful details of Marcus's abandonment. She told them about her grandfather, about his letter, about her determination to honor his legacy. And, to her amazement, they responded with warmth and enthusiasm. At Cornerstone Properties, where she had worked as a junior analyst just weeks before, her former colleagues gave her a standing ovation. Sarah hugged her and cried. David shook her hand and told her he had always known she was special. Even the executives who had barely noticed her before now treated her with respect and admiration. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. It was exactly what Elena had always dreamed of. But through it all, she never forgot what mattered most. Her babies. At 7 months pregnant, Elena's doctor had started to express concern. Carrying triplets was hard on her body. Her blood pressure was elevated. Her ankles were constantly swollen. She was gaining weight too quickly, putting strain on her heart and lungs. "You need to slow down," the doctor warned her. "Your body can't sustain this level of activity. If you don't take care of yourself, you could be putting your babies at risk." Elena heard the words and she tried to listen. She reduced her hours, delegated more responsibilities, started working from home whenever possible. But it was hard to let go, hard to step back when there was so much still to do. Then, one night, something happened that forced her to confront the reality of her situation. She was at home, reviewing documents for an upcoming board meeting, when a sharp pain shot through her abdomen. It was followed by another and another, each more intense than the last. Elena dropped the papers and grabbed her phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. The ambulance arrived within minutes. The paramedics strapped her onto a stretcher and raced toward the hospital, sirens wailing into the night. In the back of the ambulance, surrounded by strangers with concerned faces, Elena made a silent promise to her babies. She would do whatever it took to keep them safe, even if it meant giving up everything else. The doctors managed to stop the contractions, but Elena was confined to bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy. No more board meetings, no more company visits, no more late nights studying financial reports. For someone who had spent her entire life in constant motion, it was the hardest thing she had ever done. But Elena found unexpected peace in the stillness. She spent hours talking to her babies, telling them stories about her mother and her grandfather, about the world they would be born into and the dreams she had for their future. She read books about parenting and child development, trying to prepare herself for the challenge ahead. Mr. Thornton visited regularly, keeping her updated on company developments. The board had appointed an interim CEO, a competent executive named William Foster, who understood that he was simply keeping the seat warm until Elena was ready to take over. Most of the day-to-day operations continued smoothly, guided by the strategic vision Elena had laid out before her hospitalization. And then there was the matter of Marcus. Her ex-husband had not taken his public humiliation quietly. He had hired a new lawyer, a shark named Victor Crane who specialized in high-profile divorce cases. Together, they were mounting a challenge to the paternity arrangement, arguing that Marcus had been deceived, that Elena had hidden the pregnancy from him deliberately, that he deserved a share of her inheritance. Margaret Chen handled most of the legal maneuvering, but she kept Elena informed of every development. "He's grasping at straws," Margaret assured her during one of her visits. "His case has no merit. You told him about the pregnancy, he abandoned you, end of story." The courts won't look kindly on a man who threw out his pregnant wife and is now trying to claim a piece of her fortune. What about the children? Elena asked. Does he have any claim to custody? He signed away his parental rights 6 weeks ago, Margaret reminded her, in exchange for not being dragged into court for child support. Remember. Elena did remember. It had been a calculated decision on her part. Marcus had never wanted to be a father. By offering him a way out, by letting him off the hook financially, she had ensured that he could never claim any authority over her children's lives. It had been the right choice. She knew that now more than ever. But it still hurt, in a distant way, to know that her children's father wanted nothing to do with them. It still ached to think about the family she had imagined having. The life she had dreamed of living before reality had shattered those dreams into pieces. Elena pressed her hand against her belly, feeling the movement of 3 little lives, and reminded herself of what mattered. She did not need Marcus. Her children did not need Marcus. They had each other, and that was enough. 8 months into her pregnancy, Elena's water broke. It was 3 in the morning, and she was alone in her apartment, surrounded by the things she had prepared for her babies. 3 cribs, 3 car seats, 3 matching sets of tiny clothes. She had chosen to stay in the modest apartment rather than move to something larger, something more befitting her new status. This place felt like home, felt like hers. The contractions came fast and hard, and Elena barely had time to call for an ambulance before the pain became overwhelming. At the hospital, she was rushed into surgery. Triplets were rarely born naturally, the doctors explained. There were too many risks, too many things that could go wrong. A C-section was the safest option. Elena nodded, too exhausted to argue, and let them wheel her into the operating room. The next few hours were a blur of pain and fear and overwhelming love. First came her daughter, small and red-faced, screaming with lungs that seemed too powerful for her tiny body. They placed her briefly on Elena's chest before whisking her away to be examined. Then her first son, larger than his sister, with a cap of dark hair and eyes that opened wide, seeming to take in the world with curious intensity. And finally, her second son, the smallest of the 3, born quiet and still in a way that made Elena's heart stop with terror. But then he cried, a thin, reedy wail that was the most beautiful sound Elena had ever heard, and the tears she had been holding back finally broke free. 3 babies, 3 lives, 3 reasons to keep fighting. Elena named them Maria, after her mother, Henry after her grandfather, and James, after the kind assistant at Cornerstone Properties who had always made her feel welcome. As she lay in the hospital bed, watching her children sleep in their incubators, surrounded by monitors and tubes and the quiet beeping of medical equipment, Elena felt a peace settle over her that she had never experienced before. She had built something beautiful from the ashes of her broken marriage. She had honored the legacy her grandfather had left her, and she had given her children something she had never had, a foundation of love and security that would carry them through whatever challenges life might bring. But Elena's story was far from over, because somewhere in the city, Marcus Wright was plotting his revenge. And he was about to discover just how far he was willing to go to get what he believed was rightfully his. The first year of motherhood was both the hardest and the most beautiful experience of Elena's life. 3 babies meant 3 times the feedings, 3 times the diaper changes, 3 times the sleepless nights when one child's cry would wake the others and the whole cycle would begin again. But it also meant 3 times the love, 3 times the joy, 3 times the moments of pure wonder when she looked into her children's eyes and saw the future looking back at her. Maria was the fiercest of the 3, always demanding attention, always reaching for something just beyond her grasp. She had inherited Elena's dark hair and her grandmother's sharp eyes, and she seemed to understand, even at just a few months old, that the world was hers for the taking. Henry was quiet and observant, content to watch his siblings play while he took in everything around him. He rarely cried, rarely fussed, and when he smiled, It was with a warmth that reminded Elena so much of the grandfather he was named after that it sometimes brought tears to her eyes. James was the dreamer, always staring at the ceiling or the window or the mobile that hung above his crib, his eyes tracking movements that only he could see. He was also the most fragile of the three, smaller than his siblings and slower to develop. The doctors assured Elena that he would catch up in time, but she could not help worrying about him, holding him a little closer, a little longer, whenever she had the chance. Elena had hired a team of nannies to help with the babies, knowing that she could not manage alone and still fulfill her responsibilities to the company. But she was determined to be present in her children's lives in ways her own father had never been. She woke up for the night feedings. She read stories and sang lullabies. She was there for every milestone, every first word, every wobbly step. Her work at Marchetti Enterprises continued, though at a reduced pace. The board had been surprisingly understanding about her need for maternity leave, and William Foster had proven to be a capable interim CEO. Elena attended meetings remotely when possible, delegating the day-to-day operations while focusing on the strategic decisions that would shape the company's future. She had moved out of her small apartment and into a brownstone in a family-friendly neighborhood, a place with a garden and enough bedrooms for the children to have their own spaces as they grew. It was not a mansion or a penthouse or any of the extravagant things her fortune could have bought her. It was simply a home, warm and welcoming and filled with the sounds of children laughing. For the first time in her life, Elena felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. But she should have known that happiness never lasts forever. The trouble began with a letter. It arrived on a sunny morning in April, when the triplets were almost a year old. Elena was in the nursery, changing James's diaper while Maria and Henry played in the corner, when her phone buzzed with a message from Margaret Chun. "Call me immediately. Urgent." Elena's heart sank. Nothing good ever came from messages like that. She finished with James, handed him to the nanny, and stepped into the hallway to make the call. "What's happening?" she asked as soon as Margaret answered. "Victor Crane just filed a lawsuit on behalf of Marcus Wright. He's claiming that your grandfather's will was fraudulent, that you manipulated an elderly man into leaving you his fortune, and that as your former husband, he's entitled to half of the marital assets." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "That's insane. Marcus and I were barely married for 3 years. The inheritance came after we separated. And the will is completely legitimate. Mr. Thornton verified everything." "I know," Margaret said, her voice tight with anger. "But Crane isn't trying to win in court. He's trying to drag this out, to generate publicity, to damage your reputation so badly that the board has no choice but to remove you." "Remove me? They can't do that. I'm the majority shareholder." "You're the majority shareholder of a company that depends on public trust. If Crane can make you look like a gold digger who preyed on a senile old man, the negative publicity could tank the stock price. The board might decide that protecting the company is more important than protecting you." Elena leaned against the wall, struggling to breathe. She had been so focused on her babies, on building a life for her family, that she had not seen this coming. She had known that Marcus was angry, had known that he resented her success, but she had never imagined he would go this far. "What do we do?" she asked. "We fight," Margaret said. "Crane is good, but he's not invincible. We gather evidence, we prepare our case, and we make sure the truth comes out. But, Elena, I have to be honest with you. This is going to be ugly. The press is going to dig into every aspect of your life. They're going to question your character, your motives, your fitness as a mother. Are you prepared for that?" Elena thought about her children, asleep in the next room. She thought about her grandfather's letter, about his faith in her, about the promise she had made to honor his legacy. "Yes," she said, "I'm prepared." The next few months were a nightmare. The lawsuit became front-page news, splashed across every tabloid and gossip website in the country. Waitress billionaire accused of fraud screamed one headline. Gold digger or grieving granddaughter? Asked another. Elena's face was everywhere, usually accompanied by unflattering photos and speculation about her mental state. Marcus gave interview after interview, painting himself as the victim of a scheming woman who had trapped him in a loveless marriage. He claimed that Elena had hidden her pregnancy from him, that she had refused to let him see his children, that she had used her wealth to destroy his career. None of it was true, but the lies were printed anyway, repeated so often that they began to take on a life of their own.